The White Book by Makavelli, Chapter 1984, Vice versus the Apocalypse. The next year, Frankie said, "Relax." Some tried, but for most, hard times had come to their towns. A long-running recession coupled with Reaganomics was steadily eating away at the middle class, and tens of thousands of good, clean, hard-working people ended up side by side on the unemployment lines with the rest of us. It was the financial backing of the insiders, the shady dealings of the invisible government, and votes from the red states that had won Reagan the presidency. Now, as the 1984 campaign drew nearer, not even the rich flavor from that big block of government cheese could sweeten the sour taste of suddenly being poor. Throughout his career, Jersey boy Bruce Springsteen had appealed to the grassroots demographic. In 1984, his hit, Born in the USA, was connecting with more than just the heartland. It conveyed the feelings of many blue-collar workers and Vietnam vets feeling abandoned by their country. When the elderly and socially unaware Reagan tried to use the song to rally his campaign, many began to wonder what was going on the president's mind. War, another Frankie Goes to Hollywood song with an impeccable Reagan impersonator, proved that they had a good idea. In 1944, eager to test their new weapon and put the Japanese to shame for attacking Pearl Harbor, America dropped the very first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. 6 days later, another exploded in Nagasaki. Not to be outdone, the Soviet Union quickly produced an arsenal too. After more than 40 years, the Cold War had heated up and the eagle and bear had reached a standoff. Millions opposed to the threat of a real war and the nuclear winter that was sure to follow had good reason to think that the end was not near, but here. The effects of the first nuclear blasts were devastating. By splitting the atom, a bomb the size of a baseball could explode with the same force as 20,000 tons of TNT. And worse, if the explosion didn't kill you, there was always the fallout. In the days after the blast, radioactive purple rain and contaminated air would continue to kill slower and more agonizingly. Improvements on the bomb were made in the 50s. The blast from the new hydrogen bomb would cause as much damage as 1 million tons of TNT, creating winds stronger than hurricanes. People at least 50 miles away from ground zero would be burned by intense heat called thermal radiation, and anything in an 8-mile radius of ground zero would be turned to carbon and salt. Natural winds could carry another kind of radiation over widespread areas, creating deformities and birth defects. Top scientists theorized the same winds would carry debris high into the Earth's atmosphere, blocking the sun's rays and thus changing the climate to that of winter for an estimated time of 5 to 10 years. In short, nuclear war would mean Armageddon. Finally, in an effort to calm the nation's fears and defeat what Reagan called the evil empire, he proposed the development of SDS, or the Star Wars Defense System. From his broken mind came visions of laser-mounted satellites that would blast missiles out of the sky before reaching U.S. airspace. While the nation's economy was dwindling, the president approved the most drastic stockpile of armaments this country has ever known. Pentagon spending peaked at the rate of $34 million per hour. The agency's plan to bring order from chaos was in full effect. Russia, having greatly underestimated its opposition, had been at war in the mountains of Afghanistan for the past 4 years. Meanwhile, KGB agents were on a mission to destabilize the Nicaraguan government. With Soviet resources and military stretched thin, top officials at the CIA seized their chance to intervene. Reagan secretly trained, funded, and provided the Mujahideen with weapons, including the one that turned the tide of the war. the American-made Stinger missile, hundreds of which would soon find their way into the hands of both Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. In South America, he supplied aid to the Sandinistas, going so far as to compare the guerrillas to the soldiers of the American and French revolutions. Meanwhile, as the CIA continued smuggling into the U.S. certain commodities to help fund its covert operations, friends and family of the establishment added to their bank accounts by peddling war and its accoutrements. What did the masses do? What they always do in hard times: watched and prayed for a miracle. Meanwhile, as teen entrepreneurs were busy raising hell and learning the ropes, word of a mass murderer that had quietly been stalking them was released. Brooklyn. Oh, girl, I'm going to miss you so much. Who is going to get me into trouble now? Asked Gaeta. Tears ran down her face as she hugged Emaine tight. Good grief, Gaia. You act like I'm not coming back. This is New York City. Wylan has business here. I know. I am so happy for you. But things won't be the same around here with you gone. The 5 girls gathered at Gaeta's place all agreed. The previous night, many more had hit the streets to celebrate Emaine's engagement to Wylan Vandelay, a handsome and wealthy importer-exporter. Tomorrow, they'd be leaving for Bali, where Wylan's family had insisted they be married in Antusari under a flower-strewn altar, complete with sashes, sarongs, and Malaysian cabana boys catering to their needs. His work in the shipping industry had taken him far away from home, and now that tourism on the island was at an all-time high, Wylan had decided to return and base his company there. How could Emaine complain? He was moving her whole family from Monrovia to the islands too. Her modeling career was winding down, but with her name still popular, they thought a line of Emaine boutiques would do well on the island. Okay, knock it off. You're going to have the rest of us around here crying, said Donna, the younger of Emaine's model friends. Yeah, I'm the one who should be sad. Where is my husband? Asked Gaia's neighbor Marvella. Please, Santa, she sang, send me a rich man for Christmas. Just send me one with a job, said Gaeta. I'm not that picky. Marvella took a big gulp of imported Chablis and wondered why it wasn't fruity like her Asti. Girl, he sent you your present early. You got your ex here with you. I know how long it's been since you... Marvella closed her eyes and began grinding her hips. You better get some, girl. Gaeta blushed, embarrassed. No, there won't be none of that in here. I want something young and strong, like the ones dancing in the leather last night. You know, at that rowdy place. You mean the Mud Club? Said Donna. Yeah, they were too wild at that place for me, honey, said Marvella. I like the jazz club in Harlem better. What about Xenon? Asked Emaine. That was all right. I used to like disco. We should have gone to Studio 54. Emaine and Donna looked at each other as they sipped their wine. They'd taken Gaeta back in its heyday, but they knew that Marvella would have never made it past the velvet rope. Gaia knew it too. You wouldn't like it. It's crazy as the older place, she said. Not really. The Mud Club has a lot of artists, Donna explained. Robert Mapplethorpe, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Andy Warhol, and Madonna. They all used to hang out there. That's why there were all the buffed guys. Did you guys notice it was kind of dead in there last night? You know why, Emaine answered. No, Diana gasped in denial. You think so? What? Asked Marvella. The gay plague, said the models simultaneously. Samantha got up the nerve to speak as the others talked. You all know that I've been dating a physician, she said nervously. Last weekend, he took me to the most fabulous party. The one for the pharmaceutical companies? Asked Donna. Samantha took a big gulp of the wine. Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, exactly. Well, I overheard some of the board members talking. They have a new name for the plague. They call it AIDS, Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, and they say it was created by the U.S. Defense Department for the sum of $10 million. Oh, I don't believe that, said Donna. What purpose would it serve? Who wants to harm the gays? They're so much fun. Samantha was usually outspoken, but now she seemed hesitant and stammered as she began to speak. According to the board members, it wasn't really meant for gays. It was meant to be used primarily against blacks. I can't believe that, Donna said. Those doctors were playing with you. Girl, you better wake up. Everybody in Brooklyn knows about that. They call it HIV or something. They say you get it from being promise. Oh shit, you know what I'm saying. You get it from fucking too much. Marvella laughed at herself. It's supposed to get in your blood and give you all these nasty sores that don't ever heal. Donna squirmed in her seat and looked away as Marvella continued. Girl, I know folks who say they spraying that shit on the weed and mixing it with the dope. And you know what? I believe them too. I've been around here all my life, and I ain't never seen the junkies look this bad. Gaeta recalled when she was as naive as Donna. She explained it more tactfully. That talk has been going around the hospital for some time too, since about 81. Back then, it was mostly white homosexual men from the city coming in with very bad cases of Kaposi sarcoma. They were calling it the gay pneumonia or gay cancer. But the doctors, they called it GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. To this day, some of them believe that the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the New York Blood Center are responsible for infecting thousands of men in the late 70s through a project called Operation Trojan Horse. But of all the women's stories, Imaine's had to be the most hard to believe. She found herself hyperventilating, thinking about a recent conversation with her family and the state of the world she lived in. At home in Liberia, my mother told me how millions of people had become infected, and also of how the news media says that the disease originated from our people having sexual intercourse with African green monkeys and eating them. Imaine watched the other girls sit silently, wondering until she spoke. We don't have sex with monkeys, okay? Marvella let out a loud sigh of relief, and Imaine continued. I couldn't wrap my head around the enormity of the problem until I went home and saw it with my own eyes. There were some of the most beautiful human beings grossly atrophied. The whole village smelled like death, and although many people are scared to speak of it, they do believe the story about the feasibility program. They say that a number of doctors working with the WHO, World Health Organization, quit their jobs and began whistleblowing when they learned that the smallpox vaccina, that they were to inject over 1 billion Africans with was rumored to be laced with a virus that genetic scientists had created to reduce the continent's population. Donna was stunned, her mouth open wide. My God, that's genocide. Why would they do that? There was a long, uneasy silence until Samantha finally spoke. I really don't know why. But what I do know for sure is that since the disease has no cure, the pharmaceutical companies stand to reap limitless profits from legal drug sales to prolong life. In 1984, The Patriot, a newspaper in New Delhi, India, reported confessions from an anonymous source that AIDS was created as a biological weapon in a Fort Detrick, Maryland lab. Excerpt 25. So from Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper, published 1991. So in 1969, the United States Defense Department requested and got $10 million to make the AIDS virus in a lab as a political ethnic weapon to be used mainly against blacks. The feasibility program and labs were to have been completed by 1974 to 1975. The virus to be completed between 1974 and 1979. The World Health Organization started to inject AIDS-laced smallpox vaccina into over 100 million Africans for population reduction in 1977, and over 2,000 young white male homosexuals, known as Operation Trojan Horse, in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine through the Center for Disease Control, CDC, New York Blood Center. And now the AIDS virus is on the street, in the drugs. When AIDS officially began in 1981, the public was told that anal sex, drugs, and homosexuality were at the root of the new gay plague. The first cases were all young, predominantly white, and previously healthy homosexual men from Manhattan who were dying mysteriously from gay pneumonia and gay cancer in the form of Kaposi's sarcoma. The association with homosexuality was so remarkable that the disease was initially termed GRID, gay-related immune deficiency. Where did AIDS originate? Prominent cancer virologists and government epidemiologists have theorized that HIV originated in African green monkeys. Purportedly, the monkey virus jumped species and entered the black population. From there, it migrated to Haiti and Manhattan. After the virus entered the black heterosexual population in the late 1970s, it spread rapidly to millions of blacks because of transfusions with HIV-infected blood and dirty needles, promiscuity, and genital ulcers, or so the experts said. Again, not all scientists believe the official monkey story, although it is rare to find people who express this view publicly. One persistent underground rumor is that AIDS is biological warfare. Proponents of the AIDS conspiracy theory believe that AIDS has nothing to do with green monkeys, homosexuality, drug addiction, genital ulcerations, anal sex, or promiscuity, but that it has to do with scientists experimenting on blacks and gays. In short, AIDS is genocide. Most African Americans have heard the story that HIV is a manufactured virus genetically engineered to kill off the black race. 30% of New York City blacks polled by the New York Times in October 29, 1990, actually believe AIDS is an ethno-specific bioweapon designed in a laboratory to infect black people. Despite general acceptance that HIV came from monkeys and the rainforest, there is no scientific evidence to prove that HIV and AIDS originated in Africa. What is true is that the first AIDS case were uncovered in the United States in 1979, around the same time that AIDS cases were discovered in Africa. In addition, no stored African tissue from the 1970s tests positive for HIV, and scientists have a hard time explaining how a black heterosexual epidemic centered in Africa could have quickly transformed itself into a white homosexual epidemic in Manhattan. This is from The Conspiracy Reader by Al Hidell and Joan d'Arc, 1998. On May 11, 1987, the London Times, one of the world's most respected newspapers, published a front-page story entitled, "Smallpox Vaccine Triggered AIDS Virus." The story suggests that African AIDS is a direct outgrowth of the World Health Organization's smallpox eradication program. The smallpox vaccine allegedly awakened a dormant AIDS virus infection in the black population. The Times story is one of the most important ever printed on the AIDS epidemic, yet the story was killed and never appeared in any major U.S. magazine or newspaper.
"Damn," yelled Marvella. "They done made a bitch scared to fuck." They all laughed, breaking the tension in the room. "That's why I don't mind moving so much," Emaine said, sniffling. "It's so peaceful in Antasari. It's kind of in the hills, and Wyland has some nice land picked out. You guys are going to have to visit once we get things settled." "Yes, ma'am, you could count on me," said Marvella, gulping her wine. "Gaia, you ain't thought about moving back home?" "No, I'm not rich. How I'm going to go make a living in there? Even when I was out of work last year, me and Thomas still make it here. Things were hard for a while, but everything's all right now. I got a better job, more pay." She realized she'd been a little coarse in answering and reassured her friend that there were no hard feelings. "Thank you again, Emaine, for helping us." They hugged. It was rough, but it was nice being at home. I could keep me eye on my boy. "Where is my little man?" asked Emaine, rising from the couch. "I wanted to see him before I left." "He's something else," said Marvella. Donna smiled politely and gathered her things. "He is out in the street with his papa. He calls himself mad at you, girl. I don't think he could take seeing you go, so he made you a tape." Gaeta gave her an envelope off the mantel. "A tape of what?" asked Emaine. "I don't know," Gaeta said. "He made me promise not to open it." Marvella laughed. "I told you he said he's going to be on the radio. Every weekend he's in there listening to that noise on WBLS, said Gaia. "That's Mr. Magic and Marley Marl, said Marvella. The girls stared at her. "What? I'm hip. Y'all better get up on this." They all hugged and walked downstairs to say their goodbyes. As Gaeta went back in, some older boys sat on the stoop asking about Thomas. She frowned. She'd warned Thomas about the choice of friends. The next morning, Gaeta was washing dishes. Paul and Thomas had gone out early for another round of much-needed male bonding. Thomas wasn't enthused, and it showed. Time and distance had strained their relationship. Paul saw history repeating itself and was trying to bring his son around. In Thomas's mind, the man talking to him might as well have been some cool brother from off the block. He'd feel bad if something happened to him, maybe even miss him for a minute, but not much more. He was more saddened that Emaine was gone, and so was Gaeta. She was cleaning the apartment and thinking of her best friend at the altar getting married when Thomas burst in, shattering her peace. "Thomas, what you doing back so soon? Where is your—" Paul flew in through the door. "Gaeta, damn it! What you been doing? You cannot control this child." "What?" she asked sharply. Thomas slammed the door to his room while his parents argued. "I tell you what," yelled Paul. "I just saw old Miss Versey from down the street. She tell me the boy been shoplifting. What you got to say about that?" Gaeta stayed calm and explained. "I know about that, Paul. I'm doing the best I can. That happened last year when I was out of work. I've talked to him." "I don't know. If you cannot control him, I'll take him." "First," snapped Gaeta, "you're not taking no one nowhere. You understand? You take your ass back home. That's what you do. Second, don't come around here yelling at me, your breath smelling like old salad." Paul almost raised his hand. He said a prayer before storming into Thomas's room. "What's the matter with you, boy?" Thomas ignored him and kept talking. Run DMC's "It's Like That" played in the tape deck. Outside the window, Othello yelled up, "Yo, T, where the fuck was you last night? I came through around 12. I had stole a bottle of wine and come up on some dimes, a couple of Puerto Rican girls that was just dying to meet you." Paul ran over, shut the window, and said, "Turn that banging down." Thomas did as he was told as Paul looked around the room at the pictures of early rap icons taped to the wall. "Why you stealing, son?" "What you mean, man? We ain't have no money. Moms couldn't buy me nothing. We didn't have no heat. The landlord was fussing about the rent. Wasn't no Christmas. Dude, we ate sardines for dinner for a month in this piece. That's why I was stealing." Paul hadn't realized it was like that. He'd sent money once or twice to help out, but a couple of $100 didn't last a whole year. "Son, I know things was hard, but all God's children suffer. Jesus suffer. So did Lot when—" Thomas cut him off. "How was God gonna suffer? I said Jesus, not God. They the same person, ain't they?" Paul couldn't believe his ears. This from a preacher's son. "No, Thomas, you don't know the story of Jesus Christ, the foundation of Christianity." Thomas rolled his eyes at the thought of hearing a sermon. "Nah." Paul walked out of the room and returned with some wine from last night and a leftover pancake. He sat on the bed. "I can be good as the best or bad as the worst, Thomas. Stop testing me and move over." Something in his voice made Thomas a believer. Paul sanctified the sacrament, and Thomas wondered why they always did that in church. In fact, he'd wondering about lots of things. The time never seemed right to ask, but there's no time like the present. "What you doing?" "I'm blessing these things. They'll become symbols of Christ. Once we consume them, we'll be able to commune with him." Thomas looked at him with confusion. "We'll be able to feel him?" "We'll be able to feel him, you understand?" "Mm-hmm." "Now, this is Christ's body, and this is his blood." Paul gave Thomas the cup. "Drink it." He complained about the taste. "It's better than that night train you've been drinking," said Paul. "Look, son, God created the heavens and the earth. He is everywhere and in everything. He is all around us, son. He is in this room right now. And a little over 2,000 years ago, he had a son." Thomas was suddenly intrigued by the greatest story ever told. Who was his wife? He did not have a wife. Save your questions. Anyway, his son was named Jesus. He was born in a horse stable in Bethlehem to his mother, Mary. His father was named Joseph. But you said, "Wait a minute now." Paul cleared his throat. "So Mary say that her and Joseph were not doing nothing. So right there, you have the boy's first miracle. Joseph was a carpenter, which means one who builds with wood. Jesus was a smart boy, and his father teach him the craft. When he was about your age, He ran off for a few days. When his parents found him, he was in the temple talking about religion with some of the Jewish elders. Mary and Joseph were Jewish and the Romans were pagans. But listen, because this is important. Paul poured them both another glass of wine for a toast. Don't let them fool you. Jesus was a black man, and one day the almighty Jah come take all his children back home to Africa. After his second glass, Thomas had started to feel something. Gradually, he was becoming a believer. All right, so when he turns about 30, he go to Jordan to see John the Baptist to get baptized in the river. Now when John baptized him, he heard God say, "Thou art my beloved Son, in thee I am pleased." After that, Jesus go off to the wilderness. Thomas had stayed awake in church long enough to hear this part before. I thought he was in the desert. Some say it's murder, others say homicide. No difference. While he out there in the desert, he fast for 40 days and 40 nights, and then, when the devil think he is at his weakest, he come tempting him with the 2 tongues. Paul was staring out the window. The snake be the most cunning man. Thomas, very patient. That is why it is important to know the word. Thomas shook his head. Where was I? So the devil tried 3 times to trick Jesus, and 3 times he failed. Jesus come from out the desert and start to minister. He pick up 12 folks who they call disciples. Andrew, Nathaniel, 2 Jameses, John, Jude, Matthew, Philip, Peter, Simon, Thomas, and Judas. They go from place to place teaching to love God and your fellow man. Around this time is when he started making miracles and curing the sick. The miracles get people from all over to listen to him. This one time, there'd be so many people that he'd go on the mountaintop to speak the word. There he say this, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth." And lots of them he speak to were poor folk and criminal types, but Jesus don't care. He say that's who he come to save. So he say, "Follow me," and they did. Now, when he 33 and the disciples go to Jerusalem for Passover, he know what's going to happen when he get there, but he go anyway. "Why?" asked Thomas. "'Cause you must honor thy father's wishes. Those Romans that I tell you about earlier, they don't like him. And the Jewish priests, they don't like him. But he a good dude. If he's teaching religion like the priests, why don't nobody like him? Seek. Some things you must discover for yourself, son." Thomas nodded and went back to listening. So the priests conspire with the Romans. They conspire with one of the disciples, Judas, and he set Jesus up and the priests around him. And the priests arrest him. "Wait, Judas flipped on his man?" asked Thomas angrily. The thought was anathema to him. This time Paul was less subtle. "Son, you must beware. Things not always as they seem. It be the ones you run with and smoke blunts with. If you slip, devils make them sell you out quick." His man turned on him for 40 pieces of silver. The Jews turned Jesus over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. He give the people one last time to set Jesus free, but they all worked up, talking about somebody got to die, and they voted be him. Then Pilate tried to wash the blood from his hands, but it don't work. Him and the other folk try to blame it all on the Jews, and that's not quite right either. While they doing this, Jesus is being flogged. What's that? It means a bad beating, son. Then after all this, they make him carry the cross all the way to where he is to be crucified. What does crucified mean? It means they torture him and humiliate him. Then they nail him to the cross with huge nails through his hands and feet. Then they leave him out there to die. But when he died, God was upset, you know? The whole Jerusalem was hit with an earthquake. The following Sunday, Mary go to his tomb, and his body wasn't there. What happened? The Romans stole it, didn't they? Paul chuckled. Nope. He was resurrected. God bring him back from the dead for 40 days. Thomas was starting to see a pattern. Why, it's always 40 this and 40 that. Seek, said Paul again. Thomas sighed. That's too much work, he thought. For 40 days, the disciples and other people saw him. After that, he'd go to the house of his father. And all that suffering he did was for you and me. So it's only right that we do a little suffering. Gaia stood at the door with her arms crossed as Paul emptied the bottle. Goodness, Paul, you're going to be asleep in a minute. Where's mine? Asked Thomas, testing again. I think you done felt enough this morning, Gaeta said, taking the empty bottle and closing the door behind her. So how we know all this stuff really happened? Asked Thomas. From the Bible. Paul licked the wine from his lips. That's right, he finally said. There are lots of Bibles, the 46 books of the Christian Old Testament, and the 27 books of the New Testament. Then there's the King James Version and the Good News Bible. Why are they called the Good News Bible? I don't know. But all they did was take out all the yeas, thous, and these and put it into modern words. That's good, Thomas said, smiling. I tried to read Ma's Bible one time at church. Whew, he exclaimed. I'll get the Good News one. Well, you get what you want get, but I don't recommend that one or the King James Version. Why not? Because the Bible is a code book. The thous and the these are part of the code, along with the 40/40s, the ages of the children and all that. That's part of learning doublespeak, the word. And second, you gotta think about who translated. How you know they didn't put in their own twist on things? They could have done that with all of them, Thomas thought. That's why I say no to the King James Version. James's wife Anne was a high witch, and he write book called Demonology. Plus, he a homosexual. Paul just about broke his ankle, stomping his foot on the floor. How is that man qualified to write a Bible? You tell me. So which one is right? Asked Thomas. Which one you think is right? Who knows? It's the argument of historians and theologians. Some say Jesus was born in a cave, others say Mary wasn't a virgin, and some believe Jesus, forever the rebel, survived the cross, married Mary Magdalene, went to some far-off land, and started a revolution. Others say it was all a dream. When you look through history, findings like the Gnostics' Book of Jubilees and the Dead Sea Scrolls make you question everything. Maybe that's why we should all take time to do the work and verify the facts for ourselves. Thomas took a few minutes to think it over, but couldn't decide. I don't know. That's too much to think about at once. Nothing is ever too much. Why didn't Jesus write it down himself, or at least tell somebody? He did tell some people. They're called the Essenes. Thomas looked at him like, why didn't you just tell me this before? Then he remembered there was no time like the present. So what did he tell him? Paul was standing at the door. He turned the knob and the lock popped. He took a step out and motioned for his son to come to him. When Thomas reached the threshold, he looked him in the eye. He taught them that they didn't need a tabernacle to talk to their father. Emaine and Paul left in June. By November, Reagan and his team had somehow turned the American economy around enough to secure themselves another term by defeating Walter Mondale and the first black candidate to make a serious run for the presidency, CFR member Jesse L. Jackson. For 4 years, Vice President George H.W. Bush's voodoo economics had actually put more money into the bank accounts of the rich. Sitcoms like Dynasty, Falcon Crest, and ironically, Dallas, about a rich, double-dealing Texas oil family that eventually moved into politics, topped the Nielsen's as once again, art imitated life. When this season's programs premiered, one in particular took hold of everyone's vices and has yet to let go. Lunch period. PS 521. No, look it, said Victor. When we first came from Puerto Rico, we used to live there, bro. The buildings are turquoise and pink and shit like that. And them birds with the long-ass necks, they call them flamingos. Damn, you motherfuckers need to get out more. Hey, asked Christopher, what game were they playing when it first came on? That looked like fun. Man, fuck all that dumb shit y'all talking about, blurted Thomas. Buildings, birds and shit. What about Mayman, Dr. Voodoo in the strip club? That's how us Jamaicans get down. My brother had mad dough, big truck chain, and I know y'all saw Honey with the fat ass. Damn. Othello stopped gambling and gave him some dap. Man, that ass was fat, but I never seen a white girl with an ass like that. Thomas laughed. Yeah, playboy, that's how I'ma live. Lunch period. PS 914. Yo, son, you see that plane that landed in the water? I bet they really got those shit, son. Bill's head was in the clouds. I'm on that plane, kid. What about that gear they was sporting? Asked Arthur. That's that shit they be having in GQ, yo. That shit costs money, man. True, said Malik. But did y'all see Trudy's body? That was it right there. Arthur stopped him. Hold up. All right, I remember that. Was that really Lionel Richie singing? Man, you a dumbass, laughed Bill. Nah, that wasn't him. What about the cars? Asked Malik. They had limos, Ferraris, Caddies, and the fresh double R. I'm gonna get that, kid. You just wait. I'm gonna get everything I wish for. Lunch period. PS 616. The boy was looking at it on another level. Brother, everybody had mad heat. That chrome 45 was sweet. I held heaters before, but nothing that nice. Jermaine was a hater. Stop wolfing, son. You a square. Yo, skinny ass never held no heat. Whatever, man. You seen that sawed-off pump he had? I got that. And trust, I'll bomb first with it. Parrish tried to keep the peace. And both y'all brothers cool out. Yo, where'd they get that music from? The only good shit they played was at the end when they was going to get dude. That was fresh. Yeah, that whole scene was, said the boy. The colors and the lights flicking off the car at night. That shit was intense. It had my heart beating all fast. He banged on his chest. Jermaine smacked his lips and laughed. Your boy Phil had it on some next level shit, said Parrish. Y'all listen to that corny motherfucker? Damn, both y'all brothers are squares. Parrish had enough. Suddenly he revved the engine on a drop-top Daytona Spider. Beat it, punk. We about to cruise down to Park Avenue. The boy hopped in and gave Jermaine the finger. Yeah, later, hater. I can't see anything but my dreams coming true, he said, staring at the cafeteria through his rearview. Lunch period. PS 124. Everyone was in the park passing the blunt and drinking. AD did neither. He leaned against the lamppost, juggling rocks in his palm and watching the long arm of the law. He had one ear on the conversation and the other was somewhere else completely. Corey made AD an offer. You want to hit this, son? AD turned it down. So what you think about that Miami Vice shit? Asked Corey. Who you would be like, Crockett or Tubbs? AD was still watching the police. Now on Holmes, I'm about to be Calderon. And that completes chapter 1984 of the White Book.